All right, so the topic for today is project management principles, right? So that would be the primary focus of discussion. And as you know, project management is a vast subject, right? So we'll try to focus more on the principles, but before that, we'd get to know and cover the details at a high level. Know what is project management and what is built around it, right? And how does today's project management principles, how did they evolve, and where did they evolve from? So myself, I am Janaki Ram, and I am a PMI authorized PMP trainer from Techcanvass. So I have around 15 plus years of experience, primarily in the software industry, out of which a bulk of 13 plus years is into project management. And I am a PMP certified from PMI in the year 2014, and I am also certified Scrum Master from Scrum Alliance. And during my good old programming days, I used to be a Microsoft certified solution developer. Now, who is this webinar for, right? So let us have a quick look. For those who have a career trajectory towards a project manager role, or you may be aiming for a project manager role in a near future, or you are already in that path, right? This is very relevant for you. And those who have newly settled in a PM role, they are trying to explore the role, and they're looking at various options that they can do. And for those who are already in a PM role, but you are looking for some kind of a refresher as to what's going on, right? Like someone like me, I've been in project management since 2008 or so, right? So for me, I would like to know what's happening, right? What are the new emerging trends in project management? So how has it evolved as of today? So someone like that, you would find this useful. So what is the agenda for today? We'll try to understand what are projects, programs, and portfolios at a high level, and we'll try and understand what are the leading methodologies today. We will not go too deep into the methodologies, but at a high level, we'll touch the surface. Then we'll talk about classic process groups, how we used to handle project management as a set of sequential processes, right? And then we'll talk about the core concept that we are trying to discuss today, the project management principles. And then we will touch base upon popular project management tools, and we will close the session for today. Right. So before we start, in quite an unorthodox manner, I would like to understand from you, what do you think is the most sought after certification in project management domain today? Okay. You can either put your choice in the chat box or tell me on the call. I'm fine with either of those options. What do you think? Yes, I got one answer, PMP. Okay. I want the session to be interactive, so feel free to ask any questions. Since we are talking about project management, it's a broad subject. The questions can be anything. Don't mind it being silly. I'm fine to answer them. Prince 2, we have one more answer. Right. I'd go ahead and correct the answer, right? So the answer is PMP. That doesn't mean Prince 2 is anything less or not, right? So they are also equally in demand. So what is it that is being most sought after? As of today, it's PMP, and let's see the reason why. Okay, so there was a salary survey that was conducted by PMI. Right? PMI is the non-profit institute that provides the credentials for PMP certification. Okay, so that salary survey revealed that there is a salary difference between certified project managers and non-certified. And primarily in North America, we have a 25% difference in the salary. Okay, and you can see the numbers are higher in the other geographies. Like Poland has 32%, South Africa has 58%, and India has 38%. So that is one of the primary reasons. So since we specialize in PMP from Techcanvass, I was trying to gauge your understanding. Okay, so 25% is the difference in North America. And as we speak today, there are roughly around 1 million PMP certification holders all over the world, right? The number seems large, right? You think that there are 1 million project managers, certified project managers on PMP. You may get the image that there are too many project managers out there. but the forecast is something different, right? Research indicates that employers will need to fill 2.2 million new project-oriented roles each year till 2027. This means that project managers are going to be in high demand, and that 1 million certification holders may look tiny to you now. So throughout this course, I would be referring to PMBOK once in a while. Okay, so for those who are not familiar with PMBOK, let me give a quick introduction. So this happens to be a major reference guide for the PMP certification exam. Okay, and this is the latest. This happens to be 7th edition, and this guide contains all the best practices and standards in project management across the industries, and they have been consolidated into a single reference guide, and this is one of the major reference guide for the PMP exam. So I will be touch basing some concepts here and there from this guide. Right. So the 7th edition, just for your information, has some radical changes, and I will discuss why that is so, because the project management thought process has itself changed drastically the past 10 years, right? So we'll discuss that why. And yeah, so that one of the radical changes is that we are shifting from a process-based approach towards project management towards a principles-based approach. And that's why we are having this session as what are the principles in project management. And one more radical change is that the focus is on value delivery system. So one of the principles we'll talk today is about value. So what is value and how do we measure that and why is it important in project management? Okay, so let's understand what is a project. Okay, I'm taking PMBOK guide as reference, but pretty much almost all the frameworks have a common point here, right? A project is a temporary endeavor undertaken to create a unique product, service, or result. So how does this definition translate practically for us, right? So let us see some characteristics of a project. The project is temporary, right? That's the second letter mentioned in the definition. So when you say temporary, it means that a project has a start date and an end date. So if you are working on something and if you don't have an end date for it, it definitely does not fit under project as definition. Okay, if it is repetitive, if it is day-to-day activity that you're repeating and it doesn't have an end date, that typically falls under operations. The project has a start date and end date, so it is called temporary. A project is unique, and that is for a reason. I'll explain why. Because it has a goal or objective. So every project has a goal or objective. It need not be economic or financial. There can be other reasons as well. We'll discuss that when you're talking about value. But what makes a project unique is it has its own goal or objective. And finally, projects run because they are aligned with org strategy. That is typically with a medium-sized organization to a large-sized organization. You have your projects aligned with the organization strategy. These are the characteristics of a project. Now, let us see some examples, right? Construction of a house is a project because you definitely have a start date and end date. The launching of a satellite, right? These are unique temporary undertakings. Once you launch satellite, your project is done. Launching of a mobile application, right? So this is going to say that a project can result in a product as well. Construction of a dam. So these are typical examples of a project. Now, one step back. So what is a program, right? So if you go to medium to large size companies, projects are grouped together if they are related, and then they are managed as a program. So let us look at the definition. We'll look at the examples after that, right? So related projects, subsidiary programs, and program activities that are managed in a coordinated manner to obtain benefits not available from managing them individually. So if I had to put it simply for you, a group of related projects that have a common goal together are managed as a program. Right? Let us look at the characteristics of a program. The projects underneath are related. That's how they are called as a program. Right? Projects share mutual goals. The reason they are related is because together they are trying to achieve a shared goal or a mutual goal. So this is a program for you. Now, the first example in a project that we used was that of a construction of a house, right? Let's carry forward that analogy and look at an example for a program. Let's say I want to build a multiplex, right? It's a large project for me. So I can group together individual sub-projects, right? So a multiplex can contain a cinema hall, it can contain a restaurant, it can also contain a shopping mall. So if I have to manage this program, I may give it to individual project managers because they are projects with themselves. And I can manage this as a program, as a multiplex program, right? So in hierarchy, projects come below and programs are above projects. Portfolio, right? So that's next in hierarchy. So we talked about project, we talked about programs. Next in hierarchy comes portfolio, right? So what does PMBOK define it as? Right? Projects, programs, subsidiary portfolios, and operations managed as a group to achieve strategic objectives. Okay. So what are the characteristics of a portfolio? It has projects and programs, but need not be related. Now I'll explain that with an example. Together, they achieve strategic objectives. They are together, right? So projects and programs are together because the organization has a strategy or strategic objective or strategic goal which they are trying to fulfill. They are typically aligned to a business domain. Okay, now let's try to make sense out of this by looking at an example. We talked about construction of a house as a project, then we moved to multiplex as a program. Now, what if the company decides to spread their arms and deal with other areas of business, right? So, what if they also are constructing or also dealing with other programs like luxury villas or a farmhouse, for example, right? But together they form a domain, right? They are something like a prime real estate portfolio. They are not related with each other if you look at them, right? But for you, as a part of your senior management, it makes sense for you to group them together and manage them as a portfolio. So if I have to build another portfolio for this company, they are into real estate, right? So it can be agricultural real estate, for example, right? So you can divide portfolio based on that. So we had a look at what is a project, what is a program, what is a portfolio. From here on, we'll put our focus on project methodologies, process, and principles, right? So feel free to ask questions in the chat box. I can pause the session and answer your questions if anything is not clear. We'll start with classic project management process groups, right? So at least 20 years earlier, and more than that, project management used to happen through processes, right? You had a sequential steps of processes, and you used to group those processes together, and then you used to run your project. So one of the classic examples of process groups is the PMI's process group. So let us look at them. A project typically starts with initiation, right? This is the part where a project manager uh, typically has starts working on a project charter, right? This is the part where the project manager also starts engaging stakeholders, right? So you have a high level requirements defined here, you have high level risks, you have high level assumptions, you have a budget allocated, and you have rough timelines defined. This is your typical initiation process group. And then underneath, after that, you start by planning for the project, right? So your planning may include various attributes in a project, right? You can plan for scope, right? You can plan for quality, you can plan for schedule, right? You can plan for budget. So this is the area where you plan. Now, if you look at it, this is sequential. I initiated the project, I have defined the project charter, then I started planning for the project, like scope, quality, and budget, right? Now, so sequentially, next in lines comes executing, right? That makes logical sense. You have planned for a project, it's time for you to start executing your project. Now, execution is straightforward. Your job as a project manager is to make sure whatever you have planned for, okay, whatever you have planned for, you're trying to deliver, right? If you plan for, let's say in scope, you have planned for 100 requirements, you will try to deliver those 100 requirements as a part of execution. Now, execution goes hand in hand with something called monitoring and control, right? So why do we need this? It is pretty straightforward. You're executing a project as per your plan, but you need to monitor whether you are on track with your plan, right? If you have planned for 100 requirements, as I say, you need to check time and again whether you are on track in completing the 100 requirements within the committed timeline. And that's how you use monitor and control. So that is just one example. You can monitor and control your quality, you can monitor and control your budget, you can monitor and control your risks. So all the set of processes with which you monitor what you're executing come under monitor and control. So with this, you should be in better control of the project. You should be able to start delivering the requirements that you're committed for, and that's how you finally close your project, right? Like I said, a project is temporary. You have a start date and end date, right? And that's why you are finally closing your project. So this is your classic PM process groups, right? If you look at it, this is sequential, except for monitoring and control, which goes hand in hand with executing, planning, and a bit of initiation. This is pretty much sequential. This is classic way of dealing with project management. Now, where are we today, right? Uh, so your process-based sequential project management gave birth to something called waterfall model of project management. So some of you may be aware of it, some of you may not be. For new project managers who haven't worked on waterfall method before, this may be something new, right? So I'll just touch the surface. I'll not go into details. So it is nothing but a sequential way of managing a project, right? If I look at a typical software application as an example, so if I have to run it in waterfall model, I would typically start with analyzing the project, right? I will look at requirements. I'll try to freeze the requirements with the project sponsors and other stakeholders. And then sequentially, I'll start designing for the project, right? So once I freeze the requirements, typically design for the project before I start coding. Now, once I'm done with design, when I freeze my design, I start developing the code, right? And then here, I can't start the next phase or next process before I complete the previous process. And after I develop, I send it for testing. And after I am done with testing, I deliver. So this is all sequential, and it has its own pros and cons. So we'll discuss that in a particular slide as to what is the pros, what is the difference clearly between going sequentially and not going sequentially. Okay, so next is I'm only picking popular methodologies today. So completely contrary to the waterfall model is your agile model, right? So what you try to do is, if you look at the previous model, the customer has to wait all the way from analysis to deliver for him to realize some value out of the project, right? If each of these phase takes 1 month, we are talking about at least 5 months for the customer to realize what he has expected. So for that to be compensated, right? That's where we have a contrary methodology called agile, right? So you try to deliver incrementally in iterations, and you will fit in all your processes into single iterations. So I'm taking the example of Scrum methodology here, which is an agile framework. You have something called iterations or sprints, and instead of delivering everything at a single go, you will take pieces of the requirement and you start delivering them uh, time box by time box. So each of the sprint can be 2 weeks to 1 month long. That's a recommendation. So which means that customer can start seeing value out of his proposal right from 2 weeks of requirement gathering. So this is at a very high level, 10,000 foot bird's eye view of difference between waterfall and agile. So why are we discussing this today, right? We are supposed to discuss principles, is to understand how project management has evolved from a sequential way of dealing things to iterative way of delivering value. Okay, so this is how project management has evolved today, right? And it is going to evolve further, but as of now, this is where we stand. So what are the key differences, right? We saw how it works. What are the key differences, right? The focus is totally different. In project management, in Waterfall, we focus more on plans and artifacts because we take specific time for planning for the project. We need to make sure that we follow the plan. The focus is completely shifted towards the plan. Whereas in Agile, you have seen that we start delivering early. Since we start delivering early, the focus is more on value, what we are delivering. So what is value? How does it help project managers and stakeholders? We'll look at it in a principle in the upcoming slide. But for now, you can think that value is the benefit that you derive out of project. It can be financial or non-financial, but the benefit that you derive out of the project. So how do you handle changes, right? In Waterfall, it's very reactive. If you have frozen your requirements and you are executing your project, uh, changes are very minimally encouraged, right? Changes are very minimally encouraged, and every change has to undergo a huge process of approval and analysis. Whereas Agile welcomes change. In fact, one of the principles, founding principles of Agile says respond to change over following a plan. That's in fact a core value of Agile, one of the four values of Agile. So which means Agile is change friendly, whereas Waterfall is change averse. And planning in Waterfall is upfront. You take complete time box for you to plan, and then you freeze the plan, you baseline the plan, and you try to proceed executing the plan. And as I mentioned earlier, any changes to the plan are minimally encouraged. Whereas in Agile, you do something called rolling wave planning, right? So if you look at the previous diagram that I talked about iteratively delivering value, you have a planning activity as a part of every iteration or sprint. So you repetitively plan, you progressively elaborate, and you deliver iteratively. The authority, okay, this is very important from yeah, because we're all project managers here, right? Or aiming to be project managers. In Waterfall, a project manager's authority is more command and control. So he's in the top of the hierarchy and he takes control of most of the activities in the project. And typically he does micromanagement depending on the size of the team. But whereas in Agile, the teams are something called self-organized. Okay, so they organize their work, they take decisions, they estimate their work, and they are in control of the project. So the control has shifted from top level project manager to teams, and the control and the authority is distributed among them. So that is how you call teams self-organized in Agile. In delivery, if you have seen the previous slide, Waterfall is sequential and Agile is iterative or incremental. And in Waterfall, we have typical tilt towards contract as a project manager, right? You sign contracts and then you try to meet the contract obligations, right? But whereas in Agile, your focus is more towards customer and what is the value that is trying to expect out of the project. And in Waterfall, a project manager is typically the planner. At least he facilitates the planning. Whereas in Agile, he's more of a process facilitator, right? So the decision is taken as a team together, and that's the reason they are called as self-organized teams. And finally, the teams in Waterfall run on silos, right? So you have a lot of individual contributors in Waterfall. They are compartmentalized. So a large piece of requirement gets broken into lower level of requirements, and then individuals work on those requirements, and their perspective and their field of vision will only be limited to that activity that came to them as a task, right? Whereas in Agile, the visibility is more, there is a lot of transparency. In fact, every team member has visibility into the work of the rest of the team members. And that's how they are called self-organizing. So that ends up the team having shared goals. Okay, so this is at a high level. Quick look at the methodologies. But why do we discuss all this, right? Uh, because before we go there, I would like to understand from you, what do you think is the most important aspect in a project that a project manager must focus on? It can be anything that comes to your mind. Feel free to put it in the chat box. Communication, good. Value, good answer. Anyone else before I proceed? You can think of a lot, right? You might have worked on projects and you might have seen a lot of aspects. So I'm going to consolidate all those aspects and try to put it under 7 different uh, categories, right? So Nisli says aware of project fails, correct, right? Then put it under risk, but that's a good answer. So these are the 3 domains that PMP exam considers, right? And this makes sense, right? So we have people, we have process, we have business, right? As a project manager, your focus will be on these 3 items. Now, let me consolidate what all the aspects can be and try to put under this. Okay, leadership is important, right? Under people, you also have stakeholder, right? You not only manage your teams, you also communicate and collaborate with team members outside, right? Yogita says servant leader. That's a very good answer. It's very relevant to today's project management scenarios. Thank you. Right. So under people, I'm putting leadership and stakeholder management. Right. So process, what does it contain? Right. Delivery. Right. Somebody talked about value here. So what are you delivering? You're delivering value. So it comes under that. You manage risks. Right. So what are the things that can hamper your project process or stop your project altogether? Right. You need to manage risks as well. What else do you manage? You manage quality, obviously, and you do manage change, right? Whether it be a waterfall methodology or agile, you will be subject to change, right? Only the frequency may change here and there. And finally, business. I'm going to put a single abstract item called big picture. It can involve anything from your enterprise factors or your organizational assets or anything from outside the project in your organization that can influence your project, right? I'm just going to put it simple in a single um, aspect called big picture. Now, what we are going to do here is understand what is the principle, okay, and then try to look at popular principles and map them underneath this, right? How you can be a principle driven project manager and run your project. So how has project management evolved? Right? I have shown you that we have moved from process-based project manager to today it's more or less principle-based. Okay, and why has this come? Why do we need principles? Let us let us understand what is a principle, right? The definition of principle is that it is a fundamental truth or proposition that serves as a foundation for a system of belief or behavior or for a chain of reasoning, right? So let's make this simple, right? Let's take the 3 words after the quotes, a fundamental truth or proposition, right? So you need to identify what is the underlying truth that you're trying to achieve and use that as your guiding force. Now let us look at some examples before we get confused, right? Why do we need principles, right? We had processes, they were working well. So why do we need principles? We needed principles because the market has dynamically changed for the past 20 years. If you look at history, 20 years back, there was this internet boom, right? I'm not sure how many of you were born at that time, but we had this internet boom where slowly businesses started moving to internet, which means there was a uh, burst of competition in the market, right? And then another significant milestone was that we had the cloud boom. In the past 10 years or so, we had a gradual, high, steep uh, movement of businesses towards a cloud model. Now, Why did this shift us towards principles? Is because processes are rigid. You cannot rely on a process and try to tailor it across different projects, right? It's going to be painful. What we can do rather is define principles, right? What you want to achieve, how would you like to do your work, right? Define principles and put processes on top of principles. So tomorrow, if you want to change a process because it is not fitting your work, it becomes easy because the underlying principle never changes. You are only going to change the process on top of it that is going to fit your work. So that is the reason you see that there is a shift from process-based project management to principle-based. Now, don't get me wrong. There are still a lot of projects that are still relevant to go with process-based approach, right? So this is still relevant in this market, but as a project manager, we should be balancing between both depending on the complexity of the project. Now, if you look at this situation here, uh, they're trying to put the same process across for uh, different projects if you look at it that way, and that doesn't fit, right? Let's take on some general examples of what is a principle. Like Mr. Mark is a man of principle and good to his word. And that is his principle. He sticks to his word. So whatever he does on top of that principle, he makes sure that he doesn't deviate from his principle. He'll always stick to his word. All internal combustion engines work on the same principles. Now, this is a scientific example. Your gravitational theories run on a fundamental truth based on principles of gravity, right? So, so it's an underlying fundamental truth. Countries must have certain fundamental principles of human rights. That's another example. These are general examples. Two principles of happiness are being kind and smiling a lot. They have a business principle in which is to put the customer's interest first. Okay, this matches close to what we can do, right? So let us look at some examples from a project perspective, right? If you are part of a project, not as a project manager, but as part of a project, what are some principles that can help you, right? Never start your work before your proposal is acknowledged. That can be a principle, right? You commit something uh, to the customer, but the customer has not acknowledged. You start working on that. Customer says change in plan, your effort goes in waste. So you can have this as a principle. Always take feedback after you deliver your work. Right? This can be another principle. Do not work more than 2 tasks at a time. Right? So we have a limit to parallelization. So we can limit ourselves with a principle. Always keep your list of work prioritized and communicate objectively when you report work status. These are some examples of principles which can help you deliver your project. Now, now we'll come to the core of the subject, right? Project management principles. So there are dozens of popular project management principles, right? We have our Agile manifesto itself, right? There are 12 principles underneath it. We have our Prince2 principles. We have 7 principles. We have Lean principles. There are 7 again. And then with the recent edition of PMBOK from PMI, we have 12 principles. Seems like 12 and 7 are the magic numbers, but these are some popular principles. Now, what we'll do from here, we'll pick up the last one and we will uh, try to go through those principles and then look at examples, tools and artifacts that can come out of these principles that can help you as project manager. Okay. The first principle says, be a diligent, respectful, and a caring steward. Okay, this falls under leadership aspect of project management. Now, what is steward? Who is a steward and stewardship, right? So, one aspect, there are many meanings of steward, but I'll explain what is the context here. Stewardship focuses on promoting well-being for each person within an organization. One of the many ways to promote this well-being is to ensure that each individual is generally happy in his or her working environment. Now, how is this relevant to you as a project manager? This is relevant in the sense that you are not only managing and running your project, you need to make sure that the team members are comfortable. That's where a steward comes into picture. Now, how do you make your team members comfortable? These are the keywords. right? Before I explain these keywords, you know who a steward is, right? There are many meanings for the word steward, but one of them happens to be a flight attendant, right? So what does a flight attendant do when you go in a flight? Right? You technically you do not need a flight attendant, right? You have the pilot, you have the flight, you have the tickets. You can go to a destination by just sitting on your seat, right? The reason we have stewards in flights is they make you feel comfortable. You are flying 50,000 feet in the air. There must be someone who makes you feel home, make you feel safe, and make you feel comfortable. Someone who you can trust. Right? Now, as a project manager, you need to play a similar role when you are driving projects. Right? Projects can be chaotic. Right? There are ups and downs. It can be a roller coaster ride. There must be someone who plays the role of a steward when driving a project, and you as a project manager can play that role. Right? So the keywords here, right? Integrity and code of ethics. First and last one are straightforward. Right? What really matters here is care and trustworthiness. These words, right? Uh, the team should understand that you care, and there should be zero trust deficit. So that is what this principle drives. Right? So the second principle is all about creating a collaborative team environment for the project. This also comes under leadership. Now, how do you do that? Let us understand what is a collaboration, right? Collaboration is a communication and project management approach that emphasizes teamwork, innovative thinking, and equal participation to achieve objectives. But why do we need to do all this, right? Why do you need to set up collaboration in the team as a project manager? Primarily to complete project efficiently, right? Better collaboration between the team members means lesser headaches for the project manager and the project runs smoothly. And collaboration better be part of a corporate culture. In case you as a project manager land up in an organization or a project that doesn't have collaboration as a culture, you can be the starting point. Right? And then technology comes into picture. The general idea is to identify what's needed for collaboration and then decide the technology. Now let us look at some tools and artifacts for collaboration, right? One thing is something called the team charter. Okay, team charter is a document where you list down all the team's preferences, right? The team may have their own preferences like the meeting times, the communication method they would like to do, um, uh, conflict resolution techniques. So all this can be decided with the team, talk to the team, understand what are their preferences, come to an agreement with the entire team and document it. So that the team is very comfortable. Once you understand that, you can decide on next set of tools that you need, right? Your document repository can be a good collaboration tool. If your team has a good amount of documentation, you need to version them, you need to be able to share them, you should be able to put security on top of it. So you need a good document repository as a collaboration tool. Right? Uh, yeah, Mabuto, you are going to have this video uploaded for your reference. So you can come back to our YouTube channel of Techcanvass and have a look at the video. Your instant messaging can be a collaboration tool as well. And this is very popular these days. And brainstorming is a tool that you can use to collaborate, and implicitly or explicitly, consciously or subconsciously, many of us use it, right? We do not know it as a collaboration tool, but we end up using it, and this is very popular. Brainstorming is nothing but a meeting. It can be virtual or physical, where you do not have a solution to a problem, but you have the problem statement and you let the team discuss this intensely until you come to a possible set of solutions. It's just nothing but meeting in plain terms, right? These are possible sets of tools and artifacts. Now, one thing for you to remember as a guideline, right? Do not decide the collaboration technology until you know what the team wants, and that you can derive from the team charter. So once you document what the team wants, it would be ideal for you to start deciding the collaboration technology. So the third principle is effectively engage with stakeholders. Now, let us understand who is a stakeholder, right? A stakeholder is anyone who can affect or can be affected by your project, right? I'm putting it very simply. It can be an individual, an organization, or a department, right? General misconception out there that many project managers think that stakeholders are customers or senior management. Anyone who gets impacted by the team is a stakeholder. Your own team members are your stakeholders, all right? You yourself are a stakeholder in the project because you are getting affected by the project as well. So the principle says that you need to effectively engage stakeholders, right? What do you need to do? The first step is to identify stakeholders, internal within the team and external in the team, right? And you typically do it in the initiation stage of the project. The earlier you identify stakeholders, the more less risky your project would be. Secondly, you will engage the stakeholders. You need to engage stakeholders. You need to understand what are their expectations in the project so that you can document them early and include them in your requirements. You need to analyze their influence as well. So there may be many stakeholders, but who do you prioritize? If your project has 100 stakeholders, are you going to have meetings with all the 100 stakeholders? It doesn't make sense, right? You need to understand what is the power and influence of every stakeholder. Okay, and you need to do this because you can prioritize which stakeholder you need to pay attention to most, right? A stakeholder can have uh, great power and great influence, right? So he should be on top of your priority list. A stakeholder can have zero power or zero influence. He's just getting uh, interested in the project. Then he may not be in the top of your priority, but you can keep him informed in your communication as to what's going on in your project, right? So you need to analyze their influence. And finally, you need to collaborate with them as the project executes, right? You may be working on the project, you may be delivering incrementally. You need to involve stakeholders and communicate them the status of the project. So what are some tools and artifacts that can help you, right? So stakeholder register is one artifact where you typically list down all your stakeholders, okay? And you also put in your stakeholders power and influence here, okay? So that you have it for reference and it is easy for you to refer back later. And I used to maintain stakeholder register personally in a Microsoft Excel sheet. Now you can build a power versus interest grid. Okay, this is nothing but a quadrant. Okay, it is something like this. Your y-axis is your power and your x-axis is your influence. And I can start listing the names of the stakeholders in various quadrants depending on where they are, right? The top right quadrant is highly critical. They have high power and high influence. So this quadrant for you is probably the most important quadrant. Okay, you can use this visual tool to analyze your stakeholders. Your communication plan is important in engaging stakeholders, right? How do you collaborate or engage with them? So you can define a communication plan with them. uh, Certain stakeholders you may want to communicate with them on a weekly basis. Certain stakeholders you may want to communicate with them on a monthly basis, right? Depending on the power and interest on the priority, and that will in turn turn into your stakeholder engagement plan. So this is typically an Excel sheet. This is a graph in an Excel sheet typically. These both are mostly Word documents. Not necessarily in this format, but this is how it worked for me. The next principle is focus on value. Probably this is the most important. Ideally, it should come as a first principle, but again, nevertheless, it is very important. Now, I have this comes under the aspect of delivery because you deliver value. Now, why is it so important, right? What is value? Worth or usefulness or importance of deliverable, right? If we want to put it simply, the outcome of the benefit from a deliverable. Now, a value can be financial, It can be an opportunity of business. It need not be financial. You may get through one project, you may get another project as a opportunity, right? That can also be looked at as a value. Customer impact, right? It can be also social benefit. So all your non-profit companies deliver value out of social benefit, for example, right? So what are the tools and artifacts? Your business case can define value, okay? And your business value is a kind of a metric that you can use to track what is the value that's being delivered at a high level. And at a lower level, you can track story points, typically used in Agile, as how much value was delivered, okay? So business value and story points are abstract numbers. They're relative estimations, right? A project, I can say, is trying to deliver 1,000 uh, points of value, right? And some companies map this 1,000 points of value with the economic number or financial number, right? I can say that this project is going to get us a benefit of $5 million, right? Now I can map this $5 million to 1,000 points, and then I can track how these 1,000 points are being achieved in the project. So that's one way of tracking it, right? So this business value may get transferred into story points later, and at a low level, you as a project manager will be tracking story points as a value. The customer will be interested in extracting early value out of the project, right? So value is more relevant in Agile methodology, just for your information. The next principle is system interactions, right? Recognize, evaluate, and respond to system interactions. This is probably one of the most overlooked aspects as a project manager and project team members as well, right? You need to understand your project as a system, okay? So as I mentioned earlier, in Waterfall, we typically looked at a project, individual team members working in silos, working as individual contributors on individual activities. Now, if you understand project as a system, as a holistically, you will understand the big picture, right? Project teams must realize the holistic view of the project as a system. A project may behave like a subsystem or as a part of a larger system. Now, how can you do that, right? You can understand business areas. You can put focus on big picture. You can challenge assumptions. You can seek external review. So these are various ways how you can uh, understand the interactions of a system. But what are the tools and artifacts, right? So one tool you can use is systems thinking, right? System thinking is a top-down approach where the team focuses on uh, the project as a system, and then any changes you make to the system, they understand the impact to subcomponents or subsystems. It is one approach towards project. The second approach is design thinking, right? Design thinking is mostly used for innovative ideas. It's a bottom-up approach where all the team members collaborate and identify areas of improvement or efficiency within the project, and they do a bottom-up scanning of the project. Cross training can be one way of making the team understand the project as a system, because different team members work on different components, right? Now, if one team member working on one component gives a cross training to the team on who are working on other components, they get to understand the system as the project as a big picture. That can be one tool that you can use, right? And as a project manager, you can set up shared understanding in the project. Okay, you can set up shared goals so that team understands the project as a common goal for all of us, and they look at the big picture of the project rather than their individual piece of work. The next principle is about leadership behaviors, right? This is a superset of the stewardship that we talked about, and this is important. So effective leadership ensures positive outcome of the project. And one important thing here is leadership is not limited to only project manager. So you have certain attributes as a leader, and how you exhibit that also influences the project positively, right? Some attributes are adapt to situation, okay, exhibit integrity and ethics, right? Not only a project manager needs to exhibit, right? Even every team member can exhibit it, and you can train the team members on these aspects. Directive action during chaos. This is a good example of a leader, right? When the team is in chaos, a good decision maker is what they'll be looking for, right? So a leader should be able to take directive action during a chaotic situation and always have an eye on the vision. Remember, your project starts with a vision, right? And from the vision comes your project charter, and then from there comes your plans, right? Project plans, and then you execute your project. So everything has derived from project vision. A leader always has his eyes on the vision. He never deviates from the vision. So that's why you hear terms like visionary leader, right? Because they have a vision of what we are trying to achieve as a project. So what are tools and artificers that can help you here, right? Servant leadership. You might have heard this term, right? I'll put it very simply for you. A typical leader, right? A traditional leader, the team used to work for the leader, right? If you remember the classic way of that, the team used to work for the leader. The leader used to command and control and execute the project. In servant leadership, the leader works for the team. Okay, what does this mean, right? First step is a servant leader removes any impediments or blockers for the team so that they are able to run the project successfully. Okay, the second aspect of it is servant leader helps the team in smoothly running the project by understanding what the project needs, what the team members need. Okay, it need not be an impediment or blocker, right? If the team wants something that can improve the efficiency of the project, he is there to help them uh, get what they need. So there is a shift in mindset. A servant leader works for the team. Stewardship we have already discussed. You need to make sure that the team is comfortable, and the team charter, the document that I mentioned earlier, can be of help to you as an artifact here. And there are various leadership styles, right? Right from micromanager to all the way to a manager who gives free hand to the team, right? So sometimes there is a discussion whether one should be a leader or one should be a manager, right? And typically many people say that leadership scores for manager, right? But in reality, you as a project manager needs to balance between being a leader and a manager depending on the situation. The next principle is tailor based on context, right? You need to customize your project based on the context in the organization, right? Tailoring is selecting relevant process, policy, or standard for the project based on the context of the project or organization. To put it simply, how how flexible are you to customize the process for your project, right? Every project is unique, and that's the reason you need to customize. And you can customize the methodology itself based on the project needs. You can customize the standards, procedures. So all these are customizable. So what are the tools and artifacts that can help you, right? Your project management information system, whichever is in the organization, you will use that to customize your process, and then your agile tracking tools for your agile projects. This is a simple principle. Next principle, probably the most important, is build quality into process and deliverables. Now, what is quality, right? It's meeting the intended purpose of the project, if I have to put it simply, right? It may also include fit for use, right? You may meet the intended purpose of the project, but what if your product crashes quite often? Okay, it's not usable. So that is also part of quality, right? You can quality can be determined by how much you conform to requirements, how much reliable is your product, how good is the performance, how resilient uh, how resilient is your project on top of that. So there is a question. Let me quickly answer that before I proceed first. So Yogita asks that tailoring is mentioned in PMBOK 7. Will it be there if I am planning to give the exam in November 21? So there is no official confirmation from PMI on when the PMBOK 7 will be relevant as a guide, okay, for the PMP exam. November 21 looks too aggressive. I don't think you would need PMBOK 7 for November 21. In the historically, PMI has given 6 months notice for us to cope with the exam with the new edition. So you have time for that. You do not worry about it. You can still refer to PMBOK 6th edition. So what are the tools and artifacts that can help you with quality, right? So your quality metrics help you understand how good you are with the quality. So that is obvious, right? It can be a report, it can be a dashboard, however you do it. Your quality assurance and quality control. I'm going to talk both of them in parallel, right? Quality assurance is tools and techniques that you use to assure the quality you have promised to the customer, right? Quality control to ensure that the promise to the customer is taking place by measuring the quality. So your metrics and control quality go hand in hand. Your quality management plan is typically a document, and then you use variance analysis. Variance analysis, you compare expected versus actuals, right? Whether it is matching or not matching, if not, why, and you go into root cause and try to fix it. So your variance analysis is as simple as that. The ninth principle is navigate complexity, and this is more relevant in today's world, right? So we are running on high competition environment, and we typically run into requirements that are complex. So what is complex, right? There is no standard definition for complexity, particularly with project management, but we can derive it based on certain factors. So it can be number of subsystems, right? If a project has a lot of subsystems, subcomponents, for example, the complexity obviously increases because they interact with each other. And dependencies, right? So if there are dependencies externally and internally within the project, the complexity increases. Ambiguities, right? If there is ambiguities in the project in terms of requirement or design, your complexity increases. If there are uncertainties, your complexity increases. So it can be a combination of these factors, or uh, any individual reason could be the reason out of it. Now there is one more question here from Lakshman. He asks, I need to know this project management course will help in pharmaceutical industry sector. Would you please give me an explanation? Yes. So your PMP certification, right, covers a vast area of industries. Okay, it is across all industries. It is not only for software. We have students from construction. We have a lot of students from pharma. We have students from manufacturing, software, obviously. So your certification and this course is relevant for all industries. Pharma is more relevant, actually, if you ask me. Okay. So the complexity, what are the tools and artifacts, how we can navigate complexity, right? You can use brainstorming as a tool with the team to decomplex the complex items. Your expert judgment, right? You bring in subject matter experts and then try to understand the complexity and try to solve it. Your prototyping, for example, so you are building a product, it's complex, you do not understand where you start. You can start by building prototypes and then see how it behaves, and then proceed from there. And if you are trying to estimate a project with high complexity, you can use a relative estimation technique, something like story points or business values, right? Story points are typically what we use to handle complexity. Your 10th principle is handling risk responses. Okay, a risk is an uncertain future event, which if it occurs, has an effect on the project, either positively or negatively. So the general misconception is that risks are negative, but as a project manager, if you track positive risks also, you can help your project grab opportunities. So you typically calculate the probability of the risk, impact of the risk, you calculate the risk appetite, risk threshold, and these factors you use to identify risks and handle them. So what are the tools and artifacts that we use, right? So you use qualitative analysis. So here you understand the probability and impact of the risk, and then higher the probability and higher the impact, the risk becomes high priority and try to handle the risk. And quantitative analysis is you quantitatively analyze how much the impact of the risk is going to be. Typically, it is in terms of monetary factor, right? If my risk one has an impact of $100,000 and risk two has an impact of $80,000, so I would first focus on risk one to de-risk it, and quantitatively I will be going in a descending order. Okay. And then we have something called risk burn down. As and when you mitigate and handle risks, it will be a downward going slope, where the risk impact will start going down, right? Your job as a project manager is to have a downward slope for your risks, active risks. And you have a document called risk management plan, where you document how do you handle risks if it comes, or mitigate risk when it comes. And you use certain tools like decision tree. You use it for typically handling or doing quantitative analysis of your risks. The penultimate principle is adaptability and resiliency. It comes under quality. So resiliency by definition is your ability to recover from any failure or setback. And this uh, resiliency can be applied not only to project management, right? It is also used in architecture, for example, right? If your system or application goes down, how resilient is it for it to come back? Yeah. So there is one comment here. Brainstorming as a tool on its own does not achieve, hence must be augmented by brain dumping and brain walking. I completely agree with it. So brainstorming may not be solving your problems, particularly when you are trying to navigate complexity. You may want to use it in conjunction with other tools, right? But it is a good starting point. It worked for me in my experience. If the team is ambiguous in taking decisions, they all have various points and factors to discuss and take decision, but they're not able to take decision. Bringing them to a single room and brainstorming actually gives us a couple of options. It gives us a starting point where to navigate there from. But I agree with you, it standalone, it's not sufficient. So how do you make your project resilient, right? You can have short feedback loops, right? Instead of delivering your project for a good 6 to 10 months, you can deliver them incrementally in short feedback loops so that you get earlier feedback and you make your project more resilient. Continuous improvement, right? Feedback loops and continuous improvement go hand in hand. Regular inspection, that frequent quality audits, diverse team with broad skill sets, okay, that will reduce the risk a bit, and transparent planning so that the team is able to see what is being planned. If they see any risk beforehand, they can raise it upfront. So that will make your project more robust and very resilient. Right. The final principle for today is enable change to achieve the envisioned future state. Remember, I told you that traditionally project managers were averse to change, and I belong to that generation when I started my career, right? And over a period of time, we have become more change friendly, right? So changes are introduced in a project for it to stay relevant with the outside world. That's correct, right? You may have experienced, right, that you have baselined your scope, right? You have frozen your requirements. You start your project. Your customer comes back and says that I need this to be changed, this requirement to be changed. I need these additional requirements. Now, why does this all come from, right? This is because as and when market changes, the customer would like to stay relevant. This is one of the primary reasons. And uh, the modern principles in project management uh, propose project managers to be change friendly. So your change can be internal and external. Okay, uh, you would have to collaborate with stakeholders constantly to understand change upfront, and then you review and analyze the changes. And most importantly, as a project manager, if you see that your team comes from a traditional background and they're averse to changes, you need to introduce a culture of change so that they are comfortable with changes coming in. So what are certain tools and artifacts? Right? You can have a change control board, typically used for your traditional projects. This change control board reviews all the incoming changes, and then they accept or reject a change based on the impact. And if your project is change driven, if you see that your customer is constantly coming back with changes because the market is volatile, you better change your methodology to adaptive methodology, any of the agile frameworks, right? You can go with that because agile is change friendly. And you have an artifact called change management plan. You can use it to define change management process, roles, responsibilities, authorities, etc. Correct. It's a very good question. To what extent should change be allowed? since it can lead to scope creeping? It's a very good question. We have something called uh, variance, right, or tolerance. Okay, you as a project manager can set this tolerance levels beforehand. Okay, let's say your project was budgeted for uh, 1 million US dollars. Okay, now you can put in a tolerance level saying my project budget is 1 million US dollars. Now I can tolerate an additional 10,000 or additional $100,000 of additional effort coming my way. Now you can plan your project this way. So if ever your stakeholders or customers are coming with changes, you can prioritize these changes and see what can fit into this $100,000. Okay. Now, if it goes beyond that, is what when you stop tolerating. Now you can escalate that further to a project sponsor or senior management and take decisions. But this is how you can handle for your traditional projects. Okay. But if your project is not traditional and you have a certain adaptive methodology like Agile, then there is no problem because you will be introducing changes sprint after sprint. So this is a change driven methodology. So in such cases where you have frequent changes coming in, if it is going beyond the tolerance, then you can look at options of implementing a methodology that is change driven and change friendly. Okay, that's a good question. So with this, we are done with this 12 principles, right? We are running out of time, but what I will close quickly is talk about two quick project management tools, and then I'll open for questions and we can close it, right? So one popular project management tool is Microsoft Project. Some of you may be familiar with it, you would have worked with it. I worked with it a lot during the beginning of my career, particularly with waterfall projects, because Microsoft Project is good with Gantt charts, right? It helps you draw your Gantt diagrams so that you can track your committed schedule and milestones. And it integrates with other Microsoft Office tools very easily. It's not very user friendly, and it can link to multiple project plans. So this is, we have an online version of it now. Microsoft has an online version, so you can access it through web in your organization, in your internet network. But earlier it used to be a heavy desktop version where you have to install it, and every project manager had his own copy of the project plan. So this is typically used for project planning and tracking the project plan as per the execution. The second popular tool I would like to discuss from Agile perspective, right? The Microsoft Project was primarily used for waterfall method. So Jira is a tool that's widely used today for Agile projects, right? And they have an online version of it where everybody can access in the team through internet, right? So it's popular for managing Agile projects, and they also have an additional plugins for managing your information in the project, right? And then you can customize the workflow. Remember, we talked about tailoring as one of the principles. So you can customize the workflow, and it has many third-party integrations if you have to within your organization, right? Like you can integrate with your source control like GitHub, you can integrate with your Outlook, etc. So these are two popular project management tools. Now, before I close, I would like to understand from you, what is your favorite project management tool, right? So mine is Microsoft Excel for simplicity. So what is yours in your experience? I'm glad to know I have company. Prasad uses Excel as well. Anyone else has favorites? Okay, that's nice. So we are done with today's webinar. Anybody has any questions on top of what you have asked so far? When it comes to PM methodology, why always people compare waterfall and agile only for every project? Now, yeah, I would like to clarify one thing. That's a good question. There is a misconception that waterfall is traditional, it's out of date. So waterfall is not out of date. Okay, it's just that competition has increased in the market. Waterfall may not fit all the projects. People are looking for alternatives. They found Agile. So though Agile started way back in early 90s, it became popular after the internet burst and cloud burst. Okay, so it's an alternative to Waterfall to certain set of projects. So Waterfall is very relevant. So one of the persons asked about pharmaceutical industry, right? So I have seen that a lot of pharmaceutical projects run on Waterfall. It cannot move to Agile. It's very relevant. Your construction projects run on Waterfall. Your movie production projects run on Waterfall. So it's very relevant, right? So that is the reason they compare these both, because both are contrary, because either you deliver value early or you deliver value at the end, depending on the nature of your project. So these two are umbrella set of projects methodologies which you compare. So what is the percent of change that is acceptable on a scale of 100 in Agile if the business is too dynamic? So Agile is an umbrella, right? So it is it's a set of values and principles. You try to develop frameworks on top of it, right? So your Scrum is one such framework of Agile. Okay, and one more example is Kanban, right? And we have Lean, we have DSDM, we have many others. We'll talk about Scrum and Kanban, right? So your question is valid. Let's say you're running a project, you are getting a predictive set of changes from the customer. Your customer is comfortable giving you a set of changes every 2 weeks. Okay, if he is giving you a feedback and changes every set of 2 weeks, you can define your iterations to be 2 weeks, because you have 2 weeks of gap for you to implement the previous week's feedback, and you can keep on constantly delivering changes every 2 weeks. Okay, so you have predictable set of changes coming to you every 2 weeks. For example, now your customer has become more volatile. His market has become more volatile. He doesn't know which change is going to come which minute, right? So a similar implementation of Agile is Kanban, where you do not know which change is going to come your way at which minute. You will use a Kanban board or task board rather than time boxing, right? So in a task board, you have three options, three stages of a task, right? You have to do, you have in progress, and you have completed. Okay, so your focus would be identifying items that are coming on the leftmost side to do, and then look at the priority, start moving items to the next stage to closure. Your focus would be moving items from left to right. Your focus is not to do with any timeline or any time boxing, right? So depending on the nature of the changes coming your way, you can have either of these frameworks. So in your case, you are asking that frequent changes are being requested. You can use Kanban here. So next question is Thomas is asking, should we have experience as a project manager for appearing for PMP exam, or having an experience as manager for 11 years is okay to appear for the exam? Yes, you need to have, if we have a four-year educational degree, okay, you need to have 36 months of project management experience, or 3 years, right? 3 years of project management experience. So if you are having 11 years, you are more than qualified. If you are not having a 4-year degree, you need to have 60 months of project management experience, or um, 5 years of project management experience. Yeah. Anybody else has any questions? Okay, so we are running out of time. Feel free to drop in your questions at the YouTube channel. Yes, when you say 36 months, what documents are required? So you will be initially, when you apply for the PMP exam, you will be initially asked for your project description, project start date and end date, and your project description, title, and all those details, right? So once you submit your application, randomly PMI select some of these applications for audit. So if they have randomly selected your application for audit, they will ask you to produce certain documents as evidence for your experience, right? So one of those documents are your educational certificates, okay, Xerox copy or photocopy. The other set of evidence they ask for is your testimonial from your project manager or your manager, that you have worked on so and so project between so and so time as you have claimed, and you need to get his physical signature, and you need to courier this uh, hard copy evidences to PMI office. And again, this is random, not for everyone. Okay. Good. Any more questions? All right, great. The questions were great. If you have more questions, this video will be uploaded in your YouTube channel for future reference. You can put your questions there. We'll respond back to you. Thanks for your time. Have a nice weekend, everyone. Thank you. Bye.